I have the little teeny yas today.
Oh.
I was recently introduced to the term ugly gift. Hi, I'm Thaddeus Gunn, and this is Magnificent Shit, where we find the lit that kicks you in the heart balls. And I think that the American equivalent of ugly gift is silver lining, as in every cloud has a silver lining. And I've always despised that statement because I heard it my whole life, and it was used to dismiss a bunch of stuff that I was feeling bad about, that was, you know, legit to feel bad about. But I'm very glad that I got reintroduced to this term now through a guy by the name of Ken Honda, and have been using it as a different way to look at things. Like, a negative event comes with all of this other good stuff that you can find inside of it. Just to give you the place and time, this is being recorded right now during the global COVID pandemic. And it is, what day is it? See, that's the thing. Pandemic. Everybody's on lockdown. Nobody knows what day it is. I think it's May 24th, but I'm just guessing. So I tried to go back and like apply this ugly gift idea to a lot of things in my life. And one of the major things that happened to me in my life was that when I was 15, my parents moved and pretty much left me behind. So that meant that I had to go find a guardian. I had to go find a place to live. I had to work to pay my way through high school. And so I was going to high school during the day and I was working at night. And it was a pretty, you know, it's a tough existence for a 15-year-old kid. But now when I look back on it, yes, that's not to say that like your parents leaving you is not a bad thing. It's a bad thing. And given my druthers, I rather would have been supported through high school rather than having to support myself. But one of the great things that came inside that ugly gift was the necessity of me having to depend on adults that were way the more together than my own parents, obviously. And one of those people was my speech teacher and my writing teacher. His name was Mr. Lippold. Not was, still is. He's still around. And I'm still in contact with him. But one of the lessons that he gave me that really, really stuck with me throughout my life was that when I was 15 years old, and I don't even remember what I said to prompt it, but he said, you know, being 15 doesn't mean that you can be any better than any of the best people out there, right? Any of the actors, any of the writers, whatever. That age is just a number. So that concept just blew my mind. And then he pointed out to me, he was like, you know, people your age have won Academy Awards. I was like, holy cow, wow. You know, it's like, yeah. And if you ever read the Neon Bible, it was written by the guy who wrote Confederacy of Dunces, John Kennedy Toole, and it was written when he was 17. And it's an absolutely stunning piece of work. So that's one of those things that kept me going. And then another one was that I guess you could say he reintroduced me to the fact that there's humor in these things that were dry. So for example, he got me to see Shakespeare as a young man instead of like this untouchable icon somewhere, you know, who spoke this weird language that I didn't understand. And my way into that was when Mr. Lippold, who also, by the way, introduced me to Eugene Ionesco and, you know, several other like incredible playwrights. My way into that was when he introduced me to Sonnet 130. Sonnet 130, you probably know it best by its first line, "My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun." And if you're old enough, you probably remember that Sting had an album with that as the title, "Nothing Like the Sun." And so here it is, because it has been kicking me in the heart balls and making me laugh my entire life. Sonnet 130 by William Shakespeare. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes there is more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love is rare, as any she belied with false compare. Joining me this morning, I have Teresa Wilson-Gunn calling in from Seattle. I also have Alina in San Francisco, and I've got Flaminia calling in from Italy. So, speaking of ugly gifts and humor and that sort of thing, are there any ugly gifts that you have received recently, Teresa, that you can identify?
Recently, yes, I've received many, many ugly gifts and the silver linings that come with it. However, when you brought up this poem and you mentioned Sting, I have a very interesting story to go with that, because I actually got to go backstage and see Sting live during that tour back in 1988. The first time I toured around Europe, I was a really, really big fan of the Police and Sting, and went to school. I joined an English or an exchange program between San Diego State and the school in London, which was the Maria Assumpta School College. And we did an exchange program. And so I ended up going to London, going to school in London for a quarter. And then after the quarter, we were free to do whatever. And so what I did is, these were, there are major requirements and minimal and minor requirements. And in order to go to London to do this schooling, they were all minor requirements. So I did all my major ones. And so I saved up to go to this, to apply to this thing. And so I waited until my very last quarter before I graduated to attend going to London for school. And because my idea was to go to London, go to school, travel Europe, and then work in London. That was the idea, because, I just loved London, and I heard so much about it, and there was so much opportunity there at the time. And I thought, well, here's this really great opportunity. So we ended up, after school was all done, we had Eurail passes at the time, and these tickets that you get, and you go through hostels, and you stay at hostels and so on and so forth. And they were good throughout all of Western Europe, because in 1988, the Berlin Wall was still up. And also at the same time, Sting, was it Nothing Like the Sun? Yeah, that's the album that he toured with that particular summer in Europe. So, me being the really big fan I was, and I was touring around with a girl named Anne, who was 18. Every time we would go to, Spain or Portugal or, France and, all these other really big countries in Western Europe. And every time we would travel to wherever we were, either we were too soon for Sting to show up, or we were too late. And we just kept missing each other until, and also I forgot to mention that one of my roommates that I was rooming with in London, her cousin was the caterer for the tour. So she said that if you guys happen to be in the same city where Sting is, go backstage and ask for Paula, and say that I know her cousin, and that maybe we can work a little bit and get backstage, or see the show. And we're like, oh boy, that'd be really cool. But like I said, every time we went to a different city, we were too late or too early, until we went to East Berlin. We went to East Germany, to Berlin. And we managed to hitchhike out there, and we managed to go to the Waldboom, which is pronounced Waldboom. And, you know, if you don't say it that way, they don't understand what you're saying. So that's another long story. Anyways, we managed to get backstage, and we were traveling with a couple of Canadians as well. And because Americans weren't looked upon too favorably because we just bombed Tripoli or something like that. So anyways, we go backstage and we meet up with her cousin, and she says, yeah, you can help us, you know, backstage, and, you know, your friends can, you know, watch the show for free. And I'm like, great, you know. So what they had me do is that they had me washing dishes, and they had Indian food that night. And so they were bringing me this really huge tubs of where, you know, chicken marsala was in, and, you know, and it was a big tub, and, you know, I had these pink gloves on, and my hair was like, I was sweaty, and I was wearing a bandana, you know, and stuff like that. And oh my God, you know, it was like the worst, it was like the worst job you possibly could have, you know. It's like, it's dirty, and it just dishes kept coming and coming, and I'm washing and washing and washing. And, you know, but I was thankful that I would be able to see the show, right? I mean, that was a silver lining. But then I'm in this tiny little sink area, you know, washing away, and I hear a British voice behind me, and I turn around, and guess who that was? That was standing right behind me, and he was facing me, and my friend Paula was facing towards him. And so, of course, when I turned around, you know, I happened to catch his vision, and of course, I'm like sweating. I'm covered in marsala. I had these big pink gloves, and, you know, I just looked terrible. I mean, I'm sure I looked absolutely terrible. And I turn around, and he sees me, and I see him, and I go, sorry. And he was like, hi. And I turned around and kept washing dishes. And it was just like, oh my God. It was the worst. But I actually did go backstage, and I actually did see the show, which was absolutely wonderful. But, and then also what was kind of interesting is that Paula asked me if she wanted, you know, because she needed help. And she said, well, you want to join the tour, you know, to tour around Europe for like a month or so. And I'm like, oh my God, what a great opportunity. But I had to turn it down because she couldn't take Anne. And I you know, committed to travel around with Anne because she was 18 years old. And if she was left alone, I don't know what would have happened to her. And I just felt like if anything was to happen to Anne while I was on this tour, I would feel just really, really terrible. So I turned it down. So I don't know if you'd call that.
But you still got the gift of Sting wrapped in like sweaty marsala sauce. So
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Sweaty Sting marsala was the dish that you wound up with.
So yeah.
It's kind of like, yeah, when we're trying to be resourceful in the kitchen, you wind up eating the craziest stuff. Like the what was it? Oh, the Trader Joe's Thai chili powder that I threw the cheese in and then burned into this big disc and then ate like some sort of like savory frisbee. So it's like, you know, again, it's like you got Sting with marsala sauce. So Alina, I love the fact that you are in a different apartment every single week. This just looks absolutely delightful. So what's you got it? Are these? What's your ugly gift?
For those who are only on audio, on video, I've been using Zoom backgrounds of different fantasy apartments on a regular basis. So I have my main fantasy apartment, and then I have certain like affairs that I have with other fantasy apartments. So today I'm kind of in a Scandinavian one. So, okay. First of all, Thaddeus, I have to say you really have a way of surprising me consistently with some of your selections. I did not see this one coming. So I printed it out this morning and I'm like, I don't even know where to go from here. So I like three things. Number one, It's an interesting way to write a love poem, right? Where you're highlighting the flaws of the other person. And it's like, okay, I personally am a giant sucker for compliments, as I think most people I know are. So it's like, you cannot tell me like enough times like the things that you like about me. Like I will always enjoy hearing that. Like I won't get bored with this, right? Like it's like you always want to hear like what's great about you. And the thing is though, that also there's this kind of maintenance, I think, of illusion that you have in relationships. And it's like, does the person love me because they think I'm really this thing that they're telling me that I am, or do they not realize like what is really like the full situation of like my full humanity? And so in a way it's like it's a love poem where he recognizes a person's complete humanity and their flaws and says I love you, you know, I love this person anyway, and yet by heaven I think my love is rare as any should belied with false compare. And it's like my mother sometimes used to say, I see your flaws but I love you like perfect. She's like, you know, some parents seem not to see their children's flaws. I see your flaws and I just think you're wonderful. And I feel like that's nice because like you kind of want to see, you want somebody to think you're wonderful when they see your complete humanity. Although this is like, this poem is like the like neghed cubed, right? It's like you know, it's interesting because it's not at all complimentary. So it's not even like he sees this person in their full humanity. It's like, dude, really? What the hell? And so that's one line of thinking that it made me go down is like, how do you want the person you love to see you? How do you want people who love you to see you? And does it like, is love worth more or less when it is combined with like this clear-eyed appraisal of all of your flaws? And then the second line that it made me go down is, well, Shakespeare, you know, there's been a lot of scholarly debate about his sexuality. Like, was he gay? Was he straight? It's unclear. He married Anne Hathaway. They had children. He left her pretty quickly to go to London. And he has love poems, love sonnets that he may not have intended to publish. Okay, so a lot of his sonnets, it's not clear that he ever intended to publish them. And there are a lot that are to the dark lady, which seems to refer to a mistress, and a lot that refer to the dark lord, which seems to refer to a man he's in love with. So he may have been either bisexual or like, this is like an interesting thing that gets debated. And I want to know, like, when he says my mistress' sighs are nothing like the sun, is this about his, like, I want to know, like, I want to get into the juice of like Shakespeare's personal life. I'm like, who is this about? Is this about his wife, who he's like, even though I see your flaws to the point that I'm cheating on you with meaning multiple men and women, I still kind of like love you in this other deep and significant way. And like, what is fidelity anyway? Is he saying my mistress, like, I don't know if like mistress meant the same thing back then, but is he like the dark lady? I hate you and I hate how I can't stay away from you. And like, therefore I'm going to see all your flaws, but I love you so much I can't deal with it. Or is it like, all of you freaking women, I'm just pretending, really. It's like the Dark Lord who has my heart. And like, I don't know how to interpret the sonnet at all. And like, I really want to know what happened. I want to know the truth, you know? But
this is fascinating because like this is the first time I have ever heard that. Seriously, I had absolutely no idea. I didn't know anything about, you know, questions regarding Shakespeare's sexuality or whatever. Where did you, what's your source on this? I mean, where can I go to find out more about Shakespeare's sexuality?
I started with Wikipedia. The source of all truth on the interwebs, but no, like they have actual scholarly citations that we can follow to research this further. But okay, so maybe what I just said is a disclaimer, guys. My source here is Wikipedia.
Well, that's true. Didn't we make a rule where we're like, we don't have to cite anything, we just leave it up to people to just go find it out? So like I can make the claim that like the Earth's surface is 70% meat, and then that's true in the context of the show, and then people just have to go find out.
You guys can Google it yourselves, listeners.
You know what's funny is like you just reminded me of my dad, who was like the charming fellow. He was the master of the backhanded compliment or whatever. But the two that I remember were, you got a real small waist for as big as your hips are. And You don't sweat
Holy
much for
shit.
a fat guy.
What?
What was
I would
Who told you that?
Yeah, well, he used to say
second
stuff
one?
like, he used to say stuff like, um, "Hello, Thaddeus. Tell me what's on your tiny mind. Say something important. I dare you."
Oh God.
I
Dang.
know.
Is your laughter like hiding how you're crying inside right now? Or
Oh
have
no!
you
Oh
actually
God!
gotten the
Come on! No! I didn't even. I never even. You know, it's funny. It's like, yeah, of course, my dad did a lot of stuff to wound me, but like that kind of bullshit was not part of it. You know.
was that his
So
way of expressing love like Shakespeare? He kind of expressed love by insulting you?
well, you know, again, I'll say it again. It's really dangerous business to psychoanalyze the dead. But you know, humor was one of the ways that he related to us. So there were two people here. Like there was my dad, the jokester and prankster, who said stuff like that, and then there was my dad, who was totally an academic. And so the only other way to relate to him was to discuss matters of like politics or religion in kind of a very dry academic way. And of course, he always had the upper hand on that because, you know, he had more degrees than a thermometer. But there was no in between. There was no huggy kissy part. There was no like, let's sit down and have a heart to heart conversation, you know, none of that. And while he was a good person who did a lot of good things, he really was a shitty parent. So, but enough about me.
Well,
Flaminia.
Shakespeare was a pretty shitty husband.
Okay.
Whether or not this is about his wife, and I kind of want to psychoanalyze him. But yeah, Flaminia, what do you think?
Flaminia, yes.
You know, the backhanded compliments thing, and now that I think of it, I actually had some people tell me really weird thing. Like one time there was this guy, and we were not actually dating, we were friends, but then one night we slept together, and the next morning he said, "I like you, but I don't like you," which was something really confusing, you know? And then I remember also this other guy who instead liked me very much, and he at some point, he decided to say, I'm in love with you, even though you're not, what was that he said? I think he said something like, even though you're chubby, which was like another weird thing to say, you know, when you want to like end up in a relationship with somebody, maybe. But then, you know, it's like what Shakespeare does in the sonnet. He's demolishing whoever, you know, this mistress is. And I'm so fascinated by what Alina was saying. You know, I didn't know anything about the Dark Lady, and now I want to know everything about it. I mean, I want more Shakespeare gossip. Is that like, so there's the Dark Lady and the Dark Lord?
Yeah, so, okay, I'm not an expert in this topic, as shown by the fact that the Fair Lord. It's, according to Wikipedia's article on Shakespeare's sexuality, there's an article specifically on this, okay? The only explicit references to sexual acts or physical lust occur in the Dark Lady sonnets, which unambiguously state that the poet and the lady are lovers. Nevertheless, there are numerous passages in the sonnets addressed to the Fair Lord that have been read as expressing desire for a younger man. In Sonnet 13, he's called Dear My Love, and Sonnet 15 announces that the poet is at war with time for love of you. Sonnet 18 asks, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. So this is the thing, he compares this fair lord to a lovely summer day, and then he's saying, my mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. And yet by heaven, I think my love is rare, as any should belied with false compare. I don't know that, like, I think this might be about Shakespeare's struggle with his sexuality.
Well,
But
I think,
how do you guys read it?
okay, here's the thing. You know, being a modern American and being introduced to Shakespeare, that was one of the things that I definitely had to read while I was in London, because, you know, if you're in London, if you're in England, you have to read Shakespeare because that's where he's from. we went to the Globe Theater, you know, we went to his birthplace, you know, Avon-on-Tyne or wherever he was from. And there's museums and, you know, manuscripts and everything. And there's just so much information that you can extrapolate a lot from what is written and what is written about him. And, you know, people like to do deep readings on every, you know, thing, and they pour over every word and they go, oh, what does this mean? You know, that sort of thing. And it's almost like his writing is just so ambiguous, or, you know, really hard to pin down. You can't just read it and go, oh, I get it. You have to not only read it, but you have to research it. And then you have to not only research it, you have to learn about history and, you know, what the culture was at the time, you know, because this was what, the Elizabethan age.
You're describing,
You know?
this is like a lot of work, Teresa. I prefer jumping to conclusions.
Yeah. Well, okay then.
No, sorry, carry on, carry on.
You know, yeah, it's a lot of work, but, you know, you can get a lot of really great stuff out of the research. I'm just saying, I mean, you know, just going to England, you know, it's like Shakespeare is like shoved down your throat, you know. And I have to admit, I wasn't too crazy about Shakespeare when I first read Shakespeare, because I didn't understand. I didn't understand the language. I didn't understand why he couldn't just say what he needed to say. You know, it had to be hidden under these layers of words that had different meanings. And my English teacher, who was trying to get me into Shakespeare, it was like, well, if he meant that he put his hand under her dress, why didn't he just say, I put my hand under her dress? You know what I mean? Instead of this, handy, up the skirts of flowers. You know, it's like, just tell me.
That's true. I mean, that's what Mr. Lippold was for me. I mean, he was the one that actually introduced me to, you know, the beauty of Shakespeare, but I never would have gotten there on my own. So he is pretty much the biscuit master for me when it comes to, he supplied me with all the biscuits that I needed in order to, you know, love the Shakespeare. And finally, you know, when I got to, you know, out of all the little humorous bits and got to the histories like Henry IV, all of that, you know, all of like seeing the humor, starting to feel Shakespeare is human, and then getting to the histories. And then all of a sudden those characters were just vibrant. And so, yeah, Henry IV is one of my favorite Shakespeare plays. And it's not a comedy, it's a history, you know?
Right.
But it also exposed to me like all of the things that it is possible to do with language, you know? Because previous to like taking that creative writing course, you know, I tried to write stuff, but it was all like, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. I thought that's all you could do with language, you know? So, anything else? Anyone?
Well, I don't know how you guys feel about my first line of reasoning, I guess. Like the whole thing of like, what is love? Like, what is as he expresses it here, like, how does it make you guys feel about, I guess, like, how do you guys feel about the sentiments he's expressing in the poem?
Well, you know, one of the things that and this is a structural thing. The line, he does something great here that he doesn't do, that I didn't see him do in another sonnet. And that is that he just like, I grant I never saw a goddess go, my mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground, right? So the line perfectly reflects like her stuttered gait, which I thought was brilliant. But I mean, as far as what he's saying there about, you know, what he feels. Oh, the other thing that I like about it structurally, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around all over the place here, is also the thing that I love about haiku. And haiku does this in a lot less space, but the last line reverses the first two, either reverses or just explodes them. And that's what happens in every sonnet. I think that's understood as part of the form. But I think that what the subtext to every single line leading up there, and when he's saying, you know, she's got black wires on her head and her breasts are gray and her breath stinks. I mean, come on, that's some cold shit, Shaft, right? And so, but but on the second reading, I can imagine him going, oh, my mistress eyes are nothing like the sun, you know, with every single line of it spoken with that much devotion. And it just becomes a whole different poem for me, you know?
Now, I concur with that, because love is something that you work on. Sure, you can lay your eyes on somebody and have love at first sight, you know, like in Romeo and Juliet, but love throughout the years, and especially throughout marriage, you have to work on it. And then you find out that all throughout the years, you know, the person that you fell in love with is not the same person, you know, when you first laid eyes on them. But, you know, the changes, you find them, there's humanity there, there's age, right? And stuff like that. But that seems to mellow, you know, the first, I don't know, punch of love, right? You fall in love with someone because you're just so crazy about them, and then you keep falling in love with them because you choose to love them regardless of their flaws. You choose to love them, you choose to still stay married to them because they're not perfect. There's Grace Jones did a song, you know, I'm not perfect, but I'm perfect for you. This because it's more than just your idea of what love is. It's more than what you look like. You know, it's a love is a partnership. It's a relationship. It's not a transition. So and a transaction. So I think talking about a loved one's flaws is more loving than just loving them because they're perfect all the time.
And also, don't you like end up loving specifically the flaws of someone? I mean, the all the weird shit they do, the funny / annoying noise they make when they eat, or if they have like, I don't know, if they're hoarders, or if they do funny, strange things. It's like it's what you get affectionate to at a certain point of your relationship, I think.
Mm.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, no, in any long-term relationship, you are going to know intimately every sound that person makes when they eat. Eventually, you will. So,
Yes.
and
Apparently,
at first,
I bite the ends of forks.
yeah, right. Whether they bite their fork or not. I mean, and at first it's like Jesus, and then like after the 1,000th time, it's like, oh, that's so cute, you know. And I also think that, like, you know, going back to the poem, it's like, you know, why would this guy have wasted 16 lines on somebody he really doesn't like? You know, so it's not like, it's definitely not a tear down, not a diss track, you know, none of that. So
It starts out as one.
yeah, I mean, on the surface, but see, that's the thing that I love about it. And obviously at the end here, I'm giving it 0 biscuits. I mean, spoiler, but anyway, you know, that's the thing, that it stands up to more than one reading. So since I have already shown my cards, as it were, Teresa, how many biscuits?
Well, here's the thing. I know that I read this sonnet before none, right? When I was a struggling, you know, English student, struggling really hard to get Shakespeare. And boy, I really needed a lot of biscuits back then. Now that I'm older, now that I understand a few things about writers and, you know, Shakespeare and the culture and so on and so forth, if I was to choose to show any sonnet or anything, you know, Shakespearean to someone who knows nothing about poetry, I think I might have to give a biscuit for this one, because I think, you know, someone straight off the street who doesn't know anything about Shakespeare, or too young to know about Shakespeare. I mean, I had Sting helping me, right? I had Tom Hiddleston, you know, who plays Loki. You know, he's a, you know, Shakespearean. You know, Kenneth Branagh. You know, those types of guys who embody the Englishness enough to, you know, say what they're supposed to say in the right syllable. You know, when you're speaking Shakespeare. So, you know, those biscuits have been thrown before me already, and I consume them. And so now it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, this is really cool. But for someone who is probably not into Shakespeare, I think maybe a biscuit or two, definitely.
So Alina, do you have a road of biscuits laid before you in this one, or?
So surprisingly, I will give it no biscuits because when I read it, I know. Well, so first of all, obviously, it's made me think and like do some Wikipedia research, and but that's not even. That's not why I was going to make an elaborate argument for situating it within the form and why it's an amazing sonnet, and because and also it really is a poem about life. Like I think it talks about something so close to our experience. You know, it's not actually targeting a highfalutin topic. I think we'll think about what is love and how do I know if I love somebody and if I love them enough, and how do I know if somebody loves me and if they love me enough. Like this is like a universal human question, and what is enough, what is love, and how does our assessment of a partner like play into that. Like it's just so basic every day of a topic, you know what I mean? And he touches it with humor. And I think the sonnet as a form of doing it, well, so they didn't have as many forms available to them back then as we do to us, but like to do that in a sonnet, I think is like reading it now with today's eyes, it gives it this like really nice contrast, I feel, that makes it a pleasure to read. But the reason I give it 0 stars is that fundamentally when I read it, I smiled and I was like, I was not expecting to get a Shakespeare sonnet in my inbox this morning for our reading for our podcast, but like I read it and I wanted to read it again, and I just felt excited, you know? And so because of that, because it made me feel excitement and curiosity, and it didn't like, I don't think he ever messes up the form. Like he never takes me out of the moment. So I think he executes perfectly on the form and talks about a topic that's dear to everybody. And it made me smile and laugh and research. I mean, 0 biscuits.
Excellent. Flaminia?
0 biscuits for me too, because when I first saw that you had sent us the Shakespeare poem, I thought, oh my God, how many words am I gonna have to look up now? Because I'm also very ignorant when it comes to Shakespeare. I don't know that much about him, and I haven't read much about his plays and stuff. So I was kind of afraid of having to comment, also because he's a sacred writer, but there's so much humor and also so much tenderness in this poem, and the way also in what you were saying about the structure, the way he he imitates the images with the syntax and words, which is incredible. So I'm not gonna have any biscuit with it.
Right on. Thank you all so much for convening again on a Sunday morning, as we always do. I really appreciate it. Really love your company, especially now when we can't, all be together in the same room as we have been before. I miss you all very, very much. This has been Magnificent Shit with Teresa from Seattle, Flaminia from San Sepolcro, Italy, and from Alina from San Francisco. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you on another episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Heart.
Heart.
Balls.
Balls.
Heart.
Balls.